It was one of those classic love stories that seemed to be written in the stars. I was 22 when I met Andrew, and he was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Handsome, charming, confident, he had a way of making me feel special. I remember the first time he smiled at me across a crowded room, it felt like the whole world paused. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who believed in love at first sight, but with him, it was hard not to. His presence was magnetic, and from that very first encounter, I was hooked. We had so much in common, or so I thought. We enjoyed the same movies, the same music, and had similar ambitions for the future. There were little things that made me feel like he was meant for me, how he would always open the door for me, how he remembered the smallest details about my life, like the fact that I loved iced coffee on hot days or that I preferred white roses to red ones. He made me feel seen, understood, like I was the most important person in his life. It didn't take long before we were inseparable. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing, staying up late into the night, sharing our dreams and fears. He was the kind of person who made everything seem easy, like love was a natural extension of the connection we had. We would make future plans, talk about what our life would look like in 5, 10, 20 years. We spoke of marriage, kids, growing old together. I truly believed that our love was destined to last forever. There was no question in my mind that we were perfect for each other. But as time went on, the little cracks started to show. They were so subtle at first that I almost didn't notice them. He was still sweet and attentive, but there were days when he would be quieter than usual, lost in his own thoughts. I remember one night, we were out for dinner, and I tried to talk to him about something that had been bothering me, nothing serious, just something I wanted to share. But he seemed distant, not really listening. He smiled and nodded, but it felt like I was talking to a stranger. I shrugged it off, telling myself that everyone has their off days. Maybe he was tired from work, or maybe something else was on his mind. But the days started to add up, and I began to notice a pattern. He was still there physically, but emotionally, he was slipping away. Our conversations grew shorter, our dates less frequent, and the promises he once made, promises of always being there for me, of never letting go, started to feel hollow. At first, I didn't want to admit it to myself. I refused to acknowledge that the man who had once seemed so perfect was now pulling away from me. It was easier to pretend that everything was fine, that this was just a phase, a temporary rough patch. After all, no relationship was without its ups and downs, right? But then, it became harder to ignore the truth. I noticed how he would cancel plans at the last minute or spend entire weekends without reaching out to me. He didn't seem interested in my life anymore. I started to doubt myself, questioning whether I had done something wrong, whether I had pushed him away. I began to change, too. I tried to be the perfect girlfriend, thinking that if I could just be enough, if I could be everything he needed, then things would go back to the way they were. I even tried to make him jealous, not because I wanted to, but because I thought that if he saw me with other people, it might make him realize how much I meant to him. But none of it worked. The distance between us only grew. I started to see the signs I had been too blind to notice before, the way he avoided looking me in the eye, the way his touch had become less frequent, less affectionate. It was as if he was emotionally checking out, and I was too scared to face it. And yet, in my heart, I still wanted to believe in the fairy tale we had created. I wanted to believe that this was just a temporary slump, that we could fix it, that we could go back to the way we were before everything started to unravel. But deep down, I knew things were changing, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the reality that the person I had loved so deeply wasn't the person I thought he was anymore. It wasn't a loud, dramatic betrayal. There were no heated arguments or explosive confrontations. Instead, it was a quiet erosion, a slow realization that the person I had given my heart to was slipping away, piece by piece. Andrew didn't cheat on me, not in the way most people think of betrayal. His was more subtle, more insidious. He didn't need another woman to hurt me, he just needed to stop caring. The first sign came when I asked him if he was okay. He had been quieter than usual for a few weeks, distant and withdrawn. I thought maybe he was going through something at work or dealing with stress, so I tried to be patient. But one night, after we had dinner together, I finally asked, "Are you all right? You've been acting a little off." His response was nonchalant, almost too casual, "I'm fine, don't worry about it." But his eyes didn't meet mine, and the way his voice trailed off made me feel like he was lying. I pressed him, gently, asking if there was something on his mind, something I could do to help. That was when he told me, in a calm, almost indifferent tone, that he wasn't happy anymore. I froze, the words hitting me like a slap in the face. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What do you mean, you're not happy?" He paused, then let out a long sigh. "I don't know, Emma. I just feel like we're not the same anymore. You're always asking about my day, about what's going on in my head, but I don't think I can give you what you want." His words were cold, like a knife twisting in my chest. It wasn't that he was accusing me of anything, it was that he had already made up his mind, and there was no room for discussion, no chance for me to make things right. I felt this sudden rush of panic, like I was falling but had no way of stopping it. "What do you mean? We can work through this, right? This is just a phase, a rough patch. We can fix it," I pleaded, reaching out for his hand. But he pulled away, and that gesture alone spoke volumes. His silence told me everything I needed to know. He was done. The days that followed were an emotional whirlwind. We barely spoke, and when we did, it felt like we were strangers. I tried to keep things together, tried to hold on to the person I thought I still had, but it became increasingly clear that I was fighting for something he had already given up on. His detachment grew more evident, he stopped checking in with me during the day, stopped caring about the small moments we used to share. The late-night talks that had once made me feel loved were replaced by long silences. He didn't want to be with me anymore, and I didn't know how to handle that. I spent sleepless nights replaying our conversations, looking for signs that I might have missed, desperately trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Did I do something? Was I not enough for him? These questions tormented me. I found myself seeking validation from the people around me, asking friends if they thought I had changed, if I had pushed him away. But they could see it too. They saw that he wasn't the same. They saw how distant he had become, how indifferent he was to the person I was. Then came the final blow. One afternoon, I came home early from work and found him sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I asked him if he was okay, and without looking at me, he said, "I think we should break up." There was no emotion in his voice, no struggle in his words. It was as if he had already made peace with the decision, and I was just a part of the past that he was leaving behind. I was paralyzed, unable to process what I was hearing. My heart raced, my thoughts scrambled, but I couldn't find the words to argue, to ask him why, to beg him to stay. The man I had once known, the man who used to hold me close, whisper promises of forever, was a stranger now. He had already checked out emotionally, and I was just too late to catch up. When he left, it wasn't with a dramatic final farewell. He packed his things in silence, as though he had already accepted the end. I watched him walk out the door, and in that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't just that I had lost him, it was that I had lost myself in the process. The person I had been before I met him was gone, and I didn't know who I was without him anymore. Andrew's betrayal wasn't about infidelity. It wasn't about someone else taking his attention. It was about the slow, painful realization that he had stopped caring, that he had moved on long before I had even understood what was happening. It was a betrayal of my heart, of my trust, of the love we had once shared. And in that silence, I realized the hardest truth of all: I had been loving someone who had already let go of me. The days after Andrew left felt like a blur, a haze of emotions that I couldn't quite grasp. I moved through my life mechanically, going through the motions without truly feeling like I was living. It's strange how quickly a relationship can go from being everything you thought you needed to becoming a painful, silent void. I had no idea who I was anymore, and the weight of that confusion was suffocating. At first, I tried to keep up appearances. I went to work, met up with friends, pretended that everything was okay. I didn't want anyone to see how broken I was inside. But deep down, I was consumed by this overwhelming sense of loss. I had invested so much of myself into Andrew, so much of my time and energy. I had made him my world, and now he was gone. The future I had imagined, the plans we'd made, everything had evaporated in an instant. I felt like a part of me had died when he left. The mornings were the hardest. I would wake up to an empty bed, the silence of my apartment ringing in my ears. The little things that once brought me comfort now served as painful reminders of the life I had lost. The coffee mug we had bought together sat on the kitchen counter, its handle worn from years of use. The pillow I had slept on smelled like him, and I couldn't bear it. It felt like he was still there, lingering, haunting me, even though he wasn't. I tried to fill the emptiness by focusing on my career, throwing myself into my work as a way to distract myself from the heartbreak. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the truth: I missed him. I missed the man I thought I knew, the man who had once made me feel like the most important person in the world. The man who had promised me forever and then walked away without a second thought. I had to deal with the shame, too. I was embarrassed to admit that I had failed. I had told myself that I would never be the kind of person who would let love control her, that I would never let a relationship define me. But here I was, completely undone by a man who had discarded me so easily. The people around me could see that I was struggling, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. How could I explain to them that I had loved someone who had never truly loved me back? How could I explain the anger and betrayal that I felt every time I thought about him? Then there were the nights. The long, lonely nights where I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. I would replay our relationship in my mind, searching for signs, for answers. I wanted to know what had gone wrong, why he had chosen to leave. Had I not been enough? Had I not loved him the right way? My mind spun with these questions, but there was no answer. There was no closure, no explanation. All I had were the memories, and they only served to make the pain worse. I tried dating again, but it was never the same. I would meet guys who seemed nice, who were interested in me, but something inside me held me back. I couldn't open up to them the way I had with Andrew. I couldn't let anyone in because I was afraid of being hurt again. And I hated myself for it. I hated that my heart was still so tied to someone who had broken it so thoroughly. But as time went on, something shifted. It wasn't an immediate change, but slowly, I began to heal. The pain didn't go away overnight, but I started to learn how to live with it. I started to rediscover who I was outside of my relationship with Andrew. I remembered the things that made me happy before I ever met him, the things I had neglected in the name of love. I spent more time with my friends, the ones who had been there for me through the whole mess, and I learned to appreciate the little moments, the quiet ones that didn't need anyone else to feel complete. One night, while I was out with a friend, I had an epiphany. I realized that I had been giving so much of myself to someone who didn't appreciate it. I had let my worth be defined by his actions, by his love. But in that moment, I understood that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was whole, just as I was. I had been enough all along, even when I didn't feel like it. That realization didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the pain or the scars Andrew had left. But it gave me something I had been missing for so long: hope. Hope that I could rebuild my life, hope that I could find love again, not because I needed it, but because I deserved it. And most importantly, it gave me the strength to finally let go of the ghost of Andrew. He had ruined me for other men, yes, but in doing so, he had also shown me just how much I was capable of loving myself. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. And that freedom was the first step toward the future I was finally ready to build. It took months for me to get to a place where I could even begin to see the truth about my situation. The pain had softened, and the constant ache of Andrew's absence had started to fade into something more manageable, though still sharp. But then, one afternoon, it hit me all at once. I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, brushing my hair, when it suddenly dawned on me: I had been holding on to the wrong things all this time. I had been fixating on Andrew and what I had lost. I had let the anger, the resentment, and the heartbreak consume me. And in doing so, I had neglected to see what I had gained in the process. I had been so focused on the idea that I needed someone else to validate my worth, someone like Andrew, someone who had already proven he was never going to give me that I had completely overlooked the strength I had built within myself. The more I thought about it, the more everything came into focus. I had spent so long thinking I couldn't move on, thinking I couldn't find happiness without him, that I had been blind to the life that was waiting for me outside of that toxic relationship. And even though the scars he left on me were deep, they weren't permanent. They didn't define who I was. I looked at my reflection, my eyes still a little red from the tears that had seemed endless during those early weeks, but now, there was something else. Something stronger. I had finally forgiven myself. Not for forgiving Andrew, but for giving him the power over my life for so long. I had finally let go of the guilt I had been carrying around, the guilt that had made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I had failed. I had been so focused on finding someone to fill the hole in my heart, to make me feel like I mattered, that I had completely overlooked the fact that I already had everything I needed within myself. I was the one who could heal, the one who could rebuild, and the one who had the strength to move forward without Andrew, without anyone. The realization wasn't a dramatic moment. It didn't come with fanfare or a grand epiphany. It was quieter than that, like a subtle shift in perspective, like a small shift of light in a dark room. But when it hit, it felt like everything in my life had just clicked into place. I was enough. I didn't need Andrew to define me, to validate me. I was whole on my own, and I always had been. I knew now that my past with him didn't have to dictate my future. The relationship had been a lesson in disguise, one that taught me that I was worthy of love, not because of someone else, but because of who I was. I had learned the hard way that I couldn't rely on anyone to fill the emptiness inside me. The emptiness wasn't something that needed to be filled, it was something that I needed to heal from. It wasn't a switch that flipped overnight. I still had days when I missed him, when the loneliness crept back in, reminding me of the familiar ache. But those moments didn't last as long anymore. I had learned how to sit with the discomfort, to acknowledge it, but not let it take over. I wasn't broken anymore. I was healing, and that was enough. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I felt like I was finally moving forward. The realization wasn't a cure-all, but it was the first step toward building a new life, one where I didn't need anyone else to feel whole. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready for whatever came next. I never thought I'd get to this place. There were so many moments when I felt like I was drowning in the aftermath of my relationship with Andrew, moments when I thought I would never heal. But here I am, standing on my own 2 feet, looking forward instead of back. It's strange, really. I've always been the kind of person who believed that love was supposed to make everything better, that it was supposed to fix you. But now, I see that the only person who can fix me is me. I remember a few months ago, I would have never imagined that I'd be able to let go of the past, to let go of him. I would have told you that I was just waiting for the right person to come along and make everything feel okay again. But that's not how it works. No one else can complete you. You have to do that for yourself. I had spent so much time thinking that my worth was tied to someone else's love, someone else's approval. I thought that I needed a man to feel validated, to feel like I was important. But now, I know that I am important. I am valuable, just as I am. I've learned how to be alone without feeling lonely, how to be okay without needing someone else to define me. And that realization has been the most freeing thing I've ever experienced. I've been taking small steps, rediscovering the things that used to bring me joy before I lost myself in a relationship. I've started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I've reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in forever, and I've learned how to enjoy my own company. I've realized that I am enough, that I don't need anyone else to feel whole. There are days when the loneliness creeps in, when I still long for the companionship I once had, but I've learned to sit with it. I've learned that it's okay to feel lonely sometimes, that it doesn't mean I'm incomplete. It's just a feeling, one that will pass. And in the meantime, I'm learning how to enjoy the quiet, to embrace the moments of solitude. I've also started dating again. It's strange, but it feels different now. I'm not looking for someone to fill the void anymore. I'm looking for someone who will complement my life, not complete it. I'm not desperate for someone to save me, because I've already saved myself. I've learned that I deserve a love that adds to my happiness, not one that tries to fix me. The most surprising part of this journey has been the way I've come to understand myself. I've learned to love myself in ways I never knew were possible. I've come to appreciate the woman I've become, the strength I've found in the most painful moments of my life. I've learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I made, for the parts of me I thought weren't enough. I am enough. I always have been. I'm not waiting for a man to complete me anymore. I'm not waiting for anyone to make me feel whole. I've done that on my own, and the life I'm building now is one I can be proud of. I've learned that the only person who needs to love me unconditionally is myself. And so, as I look ahead, I see a future full of possibilities. I see a future where I am not defined by anyone else's love or approval. I see a future where I am strong, independent, and happy. I've come a long way from the woman who was so broken by love. And now, I know that I don't need anyone else to be happy. I have everything I need within myself.